Welcome to my presentation on Fast and Furious and why it is the greatest anime superhero franchise ever made. Now, I'm going to get a disclaimer and a warning out there first. The disclaimer is I am well aware of the fact that anime is a very broad genre with plenty of subgenres within it. So anyone who knows anime well will want to replace every time I say anime with the word shonen. And for those who only sort of vaguely understand anime, it's probably going to be that anime that you know. The next warning is that I am going to be spoiling portions of all of the Fast and Furious movies except for F9 and Hobbs and Shaw. The former because I haven't watched it yet, and the latter because I don't really feel like it fits in with the Fast and Furious franchise very well, and it's kind of a spin off. So I'm going to kind of do that. So without further ado, let's get involved. All right. The overview here is just to tell you we just did the intro, and then there'll be three parts after that. The first part is establishing the connection, looking at the tropes and stereotypes of anime and superhero franchises that Fast and Furious shares, like quite broadly across all of their films. The second one is why it's better, and then the final part will be a canon, which is me basically listing my favorite Fast and Furious through to the worst. Spoilers, they're all kind of good in their own weird and wonderful ways, but some are better than others. So, going straight into section one. Now, a common trope found a lot in superhero and anime franchises is the concept of the found family. Now, found family is usually when a group of individuals bond together over, common goals or possibly adversity, and the bonds that they generate are stronger than the actual blood ties that they have with their so-called real family. A common example of this is the X-Men, with the Newtons going to the Charles Xavier Institute to avoid persecution, and whilst the connections that they grow there are more powerful than anything related to their own family. Fast and Furious has this all the way through. Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, and Brian O'Connor, played by Paul Walker, bond very clearly over their love of fast cars. And even though they're on the opposite sides of the law, they grow closer as the series continues. And by five, when everything has completely changed, they are basically family. You also in Fast and Furious 1, you see the group of reprobates surrounding Vin Diesel's character are all kind of there because either they like stealing TVs with DVD players built into them, or they like fast cars, or both. And you can definitely see that Dominic Toretto treats these people with the same kind of love and affection as he does his own sister, who is played by Jordana Brewster. The next one is everyone's seen it in almost every anime that has been out there. You'll introduce a main villain, say for example in Dragon Ball Z, there'll be someone like Vegeta or Piccolo. They're enemies, they fight the main characters, but then are turned slowly but surely into becoming friends. Sometimes this is because of their popularity, but other times it's just through genuine good storytelling, and it's like, no, these people are basically now have common bonds. As already mentioned, Brian and Dom are on opposite sides of the law in the first one, but by five, they're close friends. That really kind of starts in four, but you can see it growing and growing. In five, The Rock is introduced. He is clearly chasing down the rest of the Fast and Furious family, but by seven, he is very much in the folds and another one of the members of the family. Jason Statham kills one of Dominic Toretto's best friends, but in eight, he's there rescuing Dominic Toretto's baby in a hilarious tribute to Face Off. This is something that is common throughout, and you can't really have a superhero franchise running as long as something like Fast and Furious does without an enemy somewhere along the lines becoming a friend. The next one is cheese evokes tears. Like, for a lot of us looking on the outside, think of it a little bit like wrestling. Now, I cannot stand wrestling whatsoever, but those guys in those pink leotards and all that other stuff, the cheese and the overacting and the overwroughtness of things, it still evokes emotion. And superhero franchises are exactly the same. Like, there are people who will hear words like, my mother's name is also Martha, and think it's the worst thing ever, and then there'll be other people who will be dabbing their eyes as this is spoken. And similarly, at the end of Seven, there's a Wiz Khalifa song, and honestly, it's pretty terrible, but somehow they make it work. And anyone who doesn't come in and feel like a little, little moment in their throat as that song plays over near the end, and this scene is happening, you're not human. I'm just saying it. Another really common thing is that these franchises then generally have people with superpowers. Superman is faster than a speeding bullet, practically indestructible. Laser beams come out of his eyes. But really, the things that make Superman interesting is the drama that happens when he is Clark Kent, when he is talking to Lois Lane, when he is interacting with other humans. The drama that happens there and the pressures that are placed upon him, as a human being, are more interesting than all of the other stuff. Now, I'll talk more about the feats and what essentially makes the Fast and Furious crew superheroes. But again, this is important here. Like, in the beginning of 8, it basically looks like Dominic Toretto has abandoned his family. And that is the central drama, and it's far more devastating than anything that happens in that film. And we're talking a film where, at one point, The Rock reaches out from his car, grabs a torpedo that's been fired from a submarine and is flying across an ice cape, and redirects it into some jeeps and blows them all up. Like, that is funny and interesting, but really not what the franchise is about. Another important part of the anime and superhero franchises is feats. Like, people go to see like exposition, like explosions, stuff like that. I said they're not important, but clearly they're an enjoyable factor to it. Fast and Furious kind of starts off as like an origin story, not entirely an origin story because, well, it's a bit more complicated than that. I'm going to go into it in more detail later. But like in the first Fast and Furious, you feel like, okay, like this is pretty impressive, but maybe a human being could do this. By Fast and Furious 5 and Fast and Furious 6, like, they are performing superhuman feats. They are gods. Their superpower is they get into a car and they can literally do anything. Dominic Toretto is basically Superman. Once he's in his car, he goes Super Saiyan. And the kind of feats that seriously, the kind of feats that they perform have gotten like mind-bogglingly ridiculous. Anything from punching transphobes to launching a bunch of cars out of a plane to land perfectly onto a road to commit a heist. I mean, they've done it all. Run up the side of a coach as it's collapsing off a crevice to be caught by someone else in a car as they perfectly take a corner. Sure, why not? Again, survive an explosion by getting thrown out of a window and landing on a car which breaks your fall and avoids most serious damage. These aren't the acts of human beings anymore. These people are beyond that. And I think that's kind of important to give this a consideration of being a superhero franchise. The next thing to think about is death. Now, in any anime or superhero franchise, the relationship with death isn't kind of the end of things. Again, to go to something like Dragon Ball Z, people have died multiple times, gone to heaven, fought their way out of heaven to come back for a day of a tournament. People have made wishes, brought everyone back to life. Batman seems to die every few days, turns up as a vampire. I don't know what. It's kind of crazy. Superman had the death of Superman moment. He died for what, like maybe 5 or 6 issues, and then he was back, but now with a new entourage of people. Fast and Furious does exactly the same thing. Like, death is transient. It's not going to stick around. I mean, the first example, Michelle Rodriguez, who loves to get killed in her movies and come back to life, as in the Resident Evil franchise. In 4, it starts off with her playing the role of Letty. She gets killed. This becomes the arc of the whole of 4, is like, who killed her? We need to figure this out. But then at the end of 5, it's revealed that she's still alive. She's got amnesia. She's a zombie. Who knows? I mean, it could be either. Even then, we get time to the same trope there of enemies into friends, whereby in 6, she comes back with amnesia. She's one of the villains, but by the end of it, she's back in with the family, back on escapades. Revenge seems to bring Pigpa back to life as well. Luke Owens' character is a major villain in 6, and he gets thrown out of a plane, which is the same plane that multiple other people get thrown out of, and they are instantly killed. But somehow, through the power of revenge, that character actually survives and is in a coma, and then comes back to life and helps Jason Statham on his airplane heist. Deus Ex Machina also features in this one. Kurt Russell gets shot by Jason Statham. I believe it's in 7. Seems to be bleeding out. Seems to be over for him. There's dramatic music and all kinds of other stuff. And then he sort of just goes, actually, no, just take me to the desert. I'll get a helicopter and I'll be totally fine. And they're like, sure, Kurt Russell, you do whatever you're gonna do. Like, you fought the thing. You can do anything you want, really, to be honest. And then love. Now, in 7, there is an amazing scene where Vin Diesel and Jason Statham fight each other on top of a car park, basically taking chunks of car and or crowbars at each other, smashing up their cars, and all kinds of ridiculous things happen. Then basically Jaimin Hansu shows up, blows up a bunch of the car park. Vin Diesel beats the shit out of Jason Statham, then jumps onto the helicopter, latches some grenades onto the helicopter. The Rock, fortunately, has shown up, having repaired his broken arm by flexing his muscles, and shoots the grenades, killing Jaimin Hansu's character. But this also leaves Vin Diesel's character, Dom Toretto, lying in the midst of the car park wreckage, dead. Fortunately, Letty shows up and goes, hey, don't worry, I remember everything. Remember that trashy piece of jewelry you gave me? Now I remember it's because we got married and I love you and I remember everything. And so at that point, Dom Toretto goes, it was about time, and is magically alive again. And all it took was love. There is, unfortunately, one thing that Fast and Furious is unable to beat. And unfortunately, that is actual death. The actor Paul Walker, who plays Brian, died during the filming of 7, and so they had to do a whole bunch of things to kind of make it work. And the reason I reference the Wiz Khalifa song is because that song is what's playing when the actor Vin Diesel is saying goodbye to Paul Walker at the same time that Dom Toretto is saying goodbye to Brian, and he gets written out of the movie. So the only thing really stopping anyone coming back to life is actual death. And honestly, it kind of put a bit of a bummer on it. This is kind of a side note. It gives me a chance to quote an author I really like called Ezinne Ukoha. Sorry, I've always mispronounced that name. That's rude. I don't think I still did. But she brings up some points that I don't entirely agree with. But I think kind of like it does make a sense because like Paul Walker kind of was part of the heart of these things. And she basically wrote that it's blatantly clear that without the vital presence of Dom's sister and the man they both love, i.e. Paul Walker's character Brian, the cohesiveness of what's left dissolves into key players who don't reflect the strong ties that have gotten dramatically weaker since the 7th installment. Now, again, I still think 8 is pretty good, but like, I'm not gonna lie, it's not as strong as some of the other ones. And Ezinne Ukoha kind of makes some valid points. Well worth reading her stuff on Medium, even especially about the Fast and Furious. So now I've done that, I'm going to talk about why I think that while it also adheres to the framework of these things, it is better than all of those. So here we are, Chapter 2, why I think Fast and Furious is the greatest, if not the best, superhero anime franchise. And I think the first thing that it has going for it is its sense of continuity and what a lot of people call retconning, which is retroactive continuity. And I'll explain a little bit more about that near the end of this particular slide. So all the best franchises of any superhero anime, they are concerned about having a continuous story and tying things in. Now, in comics, it gets a little bit more complicated. When a franchise has been around for 60 years or so, you end up having multiple universes, things interacting with each other, things get retconned, i.e. retroactively, like actually that story didn't really happen anymore because it doesn't really tie in with the wider universe that we're trying to like tell the story about. And why I think Fast and Furious is better is simply its dedication to its completely bonkers continuity, and that's the Tokyo Drift factor. Now, Tokyo Drift is the third in the franchise. There's almost no one from the main Fast and Furious series in it at that point. There's only an appearance by Vin Diesel right at the end, and it tells a completely different story about a kid who goes off to Japan to become the greatest drifter ever. And he has a sort of mentor who's this guy Han, who's the guy pictured in the slide right there. Now, about 3/4 of the way through, Han is in a terrible car accident and basically dies. And this then motivates the white kid to be an even better drifter as a result. Um, and you kind of left it that, Vin Diesel shows up and he's like, I used to know Han. And then it's kind of, all right, cool. That's where that continuity lies. Skip to 4. Now in 4, Han's still alive. And all of a sudden you're just like, wait, so 4's before Tokyo Drift? And you play along, and at the end of the movie, Han sort of seems to be going back to Tokyo to kind of die in Tokyo Drift, and you're like, okay, that's fixed the continuity. Then 5 happens, and Han shows up again, and this time he falls in love with an IDF supporter. It becomes a big thing. At the end of the movie, then there's a kind of implied that maybe they're going to go back to Tokyo, but it's like then become confusing because how is it that there's fan of the Israeli Defense Force is now with him in Tokyo. What's going on there? So then in 6, Han and IDF woman are back and very deeply in love, and then the big climactic battle on the plane happens, and IDF woman, played by Gal Gadot, dies. And it's actually quite an impactful moment. It's kind of like, okay. Now, one of the things that I found really fascinating is that in Tokyo Drift, I thought Han was flat as hell. Like, his main personality trait is he eats a bunch of snacks, and that's kind of it. He's leaden, there's nothing really to him, he doesn't show a lot of emotion, and you're just like, okay, whatever. But then with the arc that happens through 4, 5, and 6, if you go back and watch Tokyo Drift, this is a man who's suffering from a deeply broken heart. And you're just like, oh, did you guys just manage to retcon a good performance into this terrible performance? And that's just kind of amazing. His performance becomes retroactively better based on stuff that they could never have predicted was going to happen. Now, this shouldn't really be a big deal, but given how far behind multi-billion franchises are in contrast to Fast and Furious, a series which is essentially about dudes driving really fast cars really fast is kind of shocking. And even in the first movie, they had both Jordana Brewster and Michelle Rodriguez with major talking parts being significant parts of the plot as well. And you look at something like Avengers or the MCU, they didn't even have that for the first 4 or 5 films. By later stages of the Fast and Furious, it had diversified it even more. Now, I think we can talk about a lot of the problems, like Ludacris's and Tyrese Gibson's characters do have a bunch of casual misogyny, which they just drop in there just for the hell of it, and it's kind of played off as jokes. Some of it works, some of it definitely doesn't. There's been some unfortunate casting, Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano, Gal Gadot, but even then, it is way more interesting to look at, and I think it ties into the popularity of the Fast and Furious series that people want to see themselves on screen, and I think Fast and Furious does that better than anything else out there. I mean, I don't identify with Mr. Potato Head, but as you can see in the bottom left, he's got himself something outside of Toy Story now, and it's gone beyond being him, the fat, schlubby idiot, and instead he's an action star. Great for him. The next point I'm going to make is kind of more of a personal one, and so I don't think anyone's really going to agree with it, but one of the reasons I think the Fast and Furious series is the best superhero anime franchise out there is because of my mate Ben. When I was 15, I came back to England and hated it. And there was 2 other people who started the class at the same time. One of them was Ben, and he kind of got me through some like really shitty times during secondary school. I'm really happy to find out after we parted ways that he'd actually become quite a successful actor in his own right, and not just because he plays a pivotal role in Fast and Furious 6. Now, I already mentioned the plane scene in which multiple people die. My mate Ben was one of them, and he is directly responsible for the fact that Gal Gadot dies. And that was super cool. It was also really funny because I'd already seen this movie about 7 or 8 times at least before I even recognized him. He doesn't have a major speaking part, but it's pretty sweet that he's in there. Now, whether you agree or disagree with me on any of the points that have been brought up, this is where even the people who are on board with me are probably going to disagree on something. And this is my canon. And basically, this is a listing of what I think the best and then what the worst Fast and Furious movies are. Again, I'm not going to bother to include Hobbs and Shaw. That's a spin-off. I can't even be bothered to talk about that one. So first up, Fast 5. This kind of established the template for what the Furious movies will then become, and kind of where all the superpower stuff came from. It's beautifully shot in Brazil. It's firing on all cylinders. Is well worth it. Furious 7 has got kind of that deep impact of Paul Walker's passing away during the filming of it. It was actually supposed to be two separate films, and they kind of merged them together. So it feels busy, it feels chaotic, but it all kind of works. And I have to say, kudos to the director for managing to piece it together from what the footage they had. Furious 6. This has got a great reveal. Jason Statham has murdered Han at the end. It feels like it's got a rhythm. I don't think it's quite as good as the other two, but honestly, you're not gonna have a bad time with any of the top three. Fate of the Furious, like we already implied that it went downhill. I don't think it went downhill that much, but this one does feel like it's treading on a lot of this familiar territory that Furious 7 was. In that Fate of the Furious, like, there's a couple of things in there that are just like, oh, we kind of did this before. It's still a great time, but it's not quite top tier. Fast and Furious Crossroads. Fast and Furious Crossroads is actually a video game. It came out last year. The gameplay is kind of weird. I'm going to basically say, like, it's a great story. There's so much fun to be had for people who are into Fast and Furious. And this isn't really a racing game, it's more of a Fast and Furious simulator. So take that with a pinch of salt. Absolutely worth the purchase. Fast and Furious 4. Anyway, 4 was in a weird place because it didn't seem like anyone was particularly happy to be there, especially after Tokyo Drift, that kind of had people's expectations much lower. But it kind of holds everything together. There's some really important bits that happen in it that can get called back later. For example, there's the villain of 4 actually is included in a later film, and it has a big reveal that's important to the plot line. The first one, now it's pretty low down. I actually don't think this is that bad, but I would have to say that, like, it's very shaky, very early 2000s. You kind of have to watch it just to have the build up to the rest of it, but it's kind of one of those ones where you're only going to be half watching it. It's probably the first time that you started to realize that maybe Vin Diesel could maybe possibly not be that great of an actor, because he'd actually made some good films before that. Still worth watching. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. Now, I actually think this film is pretty terrible, but the way it fits into the whole of the continuity makes it so much fun. There are too many unbelievable moments in it. For example, the main character takes a taxi from Narita Airport into the center of Tokyo. That would cost him an arm and a leg. He does not have a lot of money, so that is complete. I'll allow everything else that happened in that film, but someone taking a taxi from the airport all the way to Tokyo when there's a perfectly reasonable and very cheap bus that you can take just seems ridiculous to me. In last place, Too Fast, Too Furious. Like, it's got some charm to it. It's got a weirdly racist main villain played by Cole Hauser, which is very confusing that he's playing the role he's playing. It's got some good stunts, but, like, it's clearly missing Vin Diesel because they replace him with Tyrese, who's playing, like, this guy called Rom instead of Dom. And it's not bad, it's still fun, but it is easily the weakest of the lot. Anyway, thank you for enduring. This is pretty much all I'm ever going to put up on YouTube, I think. I just really want to do this for a goof, and I hope you enjoyed.